let me go. I got kids and responsibilities. Y'all, let me go.
I didn't do it. I don't body.
Never in my worst nightmare would I imagine being responsible for Thomas's death.
I myself and my 2 children.
You yourself and your 2 children?
Now, we move to a Broward County courtroom where Judge John Hurley is about to confront a disrespectful defendant. Brian Noville, charged with aggravated assault and domestic violence, is about to face the consequences of his actions. Let's watch as the scene unfolds. Noville ended up in court after police responded to a domestic disturbance at his home. Judge Hurley got straight to the point in handling the case.
We're charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, domestic violence battery. The court finds probable cause of their priors.
After reviewing the facts, Judge Hurley made a decision that would impact Noville's future, ordering him to be held without bond.
I'm going to order that he's not in possession of weapons, firearms, or ammunition. The court's also going to revoke his bond on 098502 CF10. You're going to be held no bond, sir, until further order of the court. Thank you.
Kidding me?
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding.
Frustrated by the judge's decision, Noville mumbled a disrespectful remark under his breath toward Judge Hurley.
That's the way life is. What did he say? Whoa, whoa, bring him back. Whoa. Bring that guy back. Bring him back. Whoa. Hey, bring that guy back.
You want him back, Judge?
Yeah, I want him back right now.
Judge Hurley wasn't going to ignore Noville's disrespectful remark. Even after Noville apologized, the judge held him in contempt of court for his language and sentenced him to 60 days in jail. After hearing his sentence, Noville sarcastically asked if he could take back his apology.
We'll sentence you to 60 days in the Broward County Jail. Thank you. I'm going to sentence you to another 60 days to run consecutive to the prior 60 days. So now you're up to 120 days in the Broward County Jail. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Nah.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. You're done.
This only made Judge Hurley more frustrated, and he added another 60 days to Noville's sentence, to be served back-to-back with the first one. Our next case takes us to a Nevada courtroom where Latasha Williams is facing allegations of threatening 2 children at a Las Vegas apartment complex. What was supposed to be a routine court proceeding quickly turned into a dramatic scene that left everyone in the courtroom stunned. It all started when Latasha stood before the judge, waiting for her sentence after being found guilty of a serious crime. As the judge announced the length of her jail sentence, Latasha's emotions flared. She became visibly upset, her voice ringing out in the courtroom as she demanded the judge reconsider his decision. The tension in the room was thick, and all eyes were on Latasha as she struggled to accept the consequences of her actions.
Let me go. I got kids and responsibilities. Y'all, let me go. No, let me.
What happened next was beyond anyone's imagination. In a fit of rage, Latasha launched herself into the air, wrapping her legs around a marshal's neck. The courtroom exploded into chaos as the marshal struggled to free himself. It took 4 marshals working together to finally restrain Latasha, but not without one of them suffering minor injuries in the process. The entire incident was captured on tape and quickly went viral, leaving viewers shocked by the outrageous behavior. It was a moment that highlighted the consequences of uncontrolled emotions and the importance of maintaining order in the courtroom. Latasha's actions, rather than earning her sympathy or leniency, only made her charges more severe. It proved that no matter how strong the emotions, aggression, and disrespect only worsen the situation. This is Clifford Williams. He was sentenced to death and spent 43 years in prison for crimes he did not commit in Jacksonville, Florida.
I just wanted to get out and be with my 6 kids. They was gone, and it wasn't nobody but them.
Williams, 34, and his 18-year-old nephew, Nathan Myers, were suspects in a murder and attempted murder. The survivor claimed they had been critically injured by the uncle and nephew, naming them both. Even though Williams and Myers had solid alibis, they were arrested and charged within hours. There was no physical or DNA evidence linking them to the crime, but both were convicted. Williams received the death sentence, and Myers was given a life sentence. It wasn't until 43 years later, while they were still in prison, that a new investigation revealed the ballistic reports from the crime lab didn't match the original testimony. The ballistic evidence was the only thing connecting them to the crime. And now, after 43 years, this was the moment Williams and Myers had been waiting for.
Mr. Williams and Mr. Myers, the indictments have been dismissed against you. You are free to go, and we are adjourned.
After hearing that they were free, they hugged each other and their team. Williams and Myers were both awarded $2 million in state compensation. This is Clemente Aguiri, who was wrongfully sentenced to death for a double murder he did not commit in Altamonte Springs, Florida.
I do know that nobody believed me back then. No one. Besides my mother, nobody believed me.
Nearly 14 years ago, Aguiri lived just a few doors down from a home where a mother and daughter were murdered. He quickly became the prime suspect. It was reported that he visited the woman's house that night asking for beer, where he discovered the bodies. He attempted to revive the woman, but panicked and ran home. He explained that he didn't call the police because he was an illegal immigrant from Honduras and feared deportation. Aguiri was arrested, convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and sentenced to death.
I didn't do it. I the body.
After Aguiri was taken out of the courtroom, it wasn't until 9 years later that new evidence suggested the DNA might have been misinterpreted. Aguiri's lawyers requested further testing, which revealed that his DNA samples matched his story, showing his DNA at the scene was consistent with him attempting to save the victims. After spending 14 years in prison, 11 of which were on death row, all charges against Aguiri were dropped, and he thanked the court.
I thank you for it. From the bottom of my heart.
As he hugs his team and family, he walks out a free man. It's reported that Aguiri is owed $720,000 from the state for the wrongful conviction. However, state lawyers are contesting this, and so far, he hasn't received any compensation. His immigration status is still unresolved.
Montgomery County 911, where's your emergency?
203 South Madison Street,
In what town?
Darlington.
Hey, what's going on there?
I just myself and my 2 children.
You yourself and your 2 children?
Mm-hmm.
The voice you just heard belongs to Brandy Worley, who on November 17, 2016, at 4:35 a.m., calmly called 911 and told the dispatcher she had murdered her 2 children. Take a seat at the Montgomery Circuit Court, where Judge Harry Siamese is overseeing the disturbing case of the Indiana mother who fatally injured her children just hours after her husband asked for a divorce.
Chilling details released in court documents tonight about the a young brother and sister in Montgomery County. The children's mother admitting to police she saw her 7-year-old son and 3-year-old daughter.
On November 15, 2016, Jason Worley, Brandy's husband, told her he had filed for a divorce after finding out she had been cheating on him. The couple had married in August 2009 and had 2 children, Tyler, born later that year, and Charlie, born in 2013. Despite some issues in their relationship, they had considered separating but chose to stay together, making a promise to put their kids first. However, Jason learned Brandy had been having an affair with their neighbor and even made a post about it on Reddit. Other users suggested he ask for a divorce, which he did. Brandy pretended to understand, and the next day, the family attended Charlie's dance program before having dinner at home. After dinner, Brandy told Jason she needed to go to Walmart for pipe cleaners for Tyler's school project. Unknown to him, she bought a combat knife. The family spent some time together before Jason bathed the kids and got them ready for bed. Brandy then lured Tyler into having a sleepover in Charlie's room. In the early hours, while everyone was asleep, Brandy entered her daughter's room, took their lives, and then tried to harm herself before calling 911.
And what caused you to do this today?
My husband wanted a divorce and wanted to take my kid. I won't let him find my kid.
Before the call, Brandy had invited her mother over to the house, and it was her screams that woke Jason, who was sleeping in the basement. When the police arrived, they found the children's bodies with deep cuts on their necks. Brandy was arrested and taken to a hospital to treat her wounds. After being discharged, she was transferred to Montgomery County Prison, where she was charged with 2 counts of murder. Initially, she pleaded not guilty, planning to use an insanity defense. However, in January 2018, she changed her plea to guilty for the murders of her children. On March 19, 2018, she appeared in Montgomery Circuit Court for sentencing. She was given a sentence of 120 years in prison. Judge Siamese offered her the chance to speak, but she declined. She appeared as emotionless as she did in her mugshot and when she first arrived at court. Let's head to Volusia County Court, where a 13-year-old is about to be sentenced. This is Travis O'Brien, a young man who, along with his 14-year-old friend, had firearms and got into a 35-minute shootout with police deputies in Florida on June 1st, 2021. Travis O'Brien, 12, and Nicole Jackson, 14, escaped from the Florida United Methodist Children's Home after Jackson allegedly hit a guard with a stick. The two kids then broke into a house on Enterprise Austin Road, Volusia County, where they found a weapon and an AK-47. When police deputies arrived at the scene after receiving reports of the break-in, what happened next wasn't what they expected.
Out the rear window toward my direction. Stand by.
Both kids, armed with the weapons they found, opened fire at the police officers, who had to hide behind nearby trees. This shocking event went viral after it was recorded by police body cams and an aerial camera on a helicopter. The standoff lasted about 35 minutes, with deputies firing 66 rounds. It ended when the police opened fire at Jackson, who had aimed a loaded weapon at them. Once O'Brien saw his partner was hit, he stepped out of the house with his hands up, signaling his surrender. Jackson, who was injured in the chest and arm, was taken to the hospital, while O'Brien was arrested and charged with attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, burglary, and criminal mischief.
My understanding is you want to enter a plea today to resolve everything?
A year later, O'Brien, now 13, appeared in court on March 23, 2022, where he pleaded no contest and was sentenced to a maximum risk assessment program, followed by conditional release. Jackson, on the other hand, was sentenced to 20 years in prison as part of a plea deal. Take a seat in the Waukesha County Circuit Court, where Judge Michael Boren is presiding over a chilling case involving two girls who stabbed their friend 19 times to please a fictional character named Slender Man. On May 3, 2014, during a game of hide-and-seek at Davids Park near Waukesha, 12-year-olds Morgan Geyser and Anissa Wire suddenly pinned their friend, 12-year-old Peyton Isabella Leutner, known as Bella, to the ground and stabbed her 19 times. According to the girls, they did this because Slender Man had told them to. After the stabbing, they told Peyton to lie down while they went to get help, but they never returned. Peyton, who was stabbed in her arms, legs, and torso, with one wound just barely missing a major artery in her heart, managed to drag herself to the roadside. A passing cyclist found her and called 911.
Are you with this 12-year-old female?
Yeah, she says she's having trouble breathing. She said she was stabbed multiple times.
5 hours later, after an extensive search, Geyser and Wire were found near Interstate 94 on their way to meet Slender Man at his mansion in Nicollet National Forest. Both girls were arrested and admitted to stabbing Peyton. After investigations, Geyser, who was considered the mastermind, was charged with attempted first-degree homicide, while Wire faced attempted second-degree homicide charges. Both girls were tried as adults, and in 2017, Wire was sentenced to 25 years to life. Geyser received a sentence of 40 years to life. This is Robert Springsteen, who spent 9 years in prison and was sentenced to death for crimes he allegedly didn't commit in Austin, Texas. At the time, Springsteen was 17, and he and 3 friends were considered prime suspects in the murders of 4 teenage girls at a yogurt shop. One of the boys was found carrying a .22 caliber weapon at a mall, the same type of gun used in the incident. The boys were released after no connection was found. However, 7 years later, one of the friends was interrogated and began revealing information, claiming that the .22 caliber weapon had once belonged to Springsteen.
This is one of the most significant things that ever happened in your life.
That's what I keep trying to explain to you. If I was there and I partook in this, I would remember these things.
And you do remember these things.
No, I don't.
He was arrested, later convicted, and sentenced to death. Springsteen's conviction was eventually overturned due to an unfair trial. While awaiting a retrial, his lawyers requested further DNA analysis from the original crime scene. Even though 17 years had passed, the analysts determined that none of the DNA at the scene belonged to Springsteen or his 3 friends. Now, Springsteen is back in court.
Second defendant, Robert Springsteen's case is being called this afternoon. Additionally, 4 pending capital indictments.
And all charges are now dismissed.
I signed these dismissals in each of the causes against these 2 defendants, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen.
Springsteen sits quietly as he learns he is now a free man. After spending 9 years in prison, his overturned conviction wasn't based on actual innocence, which means he is not eligible for any compensation. This is Eric Kelly, who was sentenced to life in prison for a robbery and murder he didn't commit in Passaic County, New Jersey. Kelly was 28 when he was arrested after a man passed away while working at a video store. Kelly had suffered a severe brain injury, which left him with a cognitive disability, making it difficult for him to understand and process information from detectives. He allegedly confessed to the crime, even though he was innocent. Despite the lack of physical evidence, he was convicted and sent to prison. It wasn't until 24 years later that the case was reopened, and advancements in DNA testing proved that Kelly was not at the crime scene.
Therefore, in light of the foregoing reasons, the motion for a new trial is hereby granted.
A new trial was granted, and Kelly is now free from prison for the first time in nearly 25 years, still carrying the fear that he might be sent back.
Mainly, I want to eat. I'm a little hungry. My legal team, I want to thank them. I want to thank my family. Just want to get back to actually living for once.
Surprisingly, the prosecution later dropped all pending charges against him. Kelly reportedly received $1 million in state compensation. We're at the Mahoning Courthouse for this shocking and heartbreaking case, where we witness the disturbing trial of Eric Pendland, a Youngstown father who erupted in court after receiving the maximum sentence in an infant abuse case. The horrifying details of the abuse he inflicted on his son are truly appalling. Prosecutors revealed that Pendland shook his infant so violently that the boy was left permanently disabled, going deaf and blind. Pendland faced 2 separate charges of child endangerment. The extent of the injuries caused by his actions was so severe that it left the courtroom in disbelief. As we follow the events in court, we witness Pendland's explosive outburst and hear emotional pleas from the prosecution and the adoptive mother of the victim. It all began on March 1st, 2017. Eric Pendland, 37, was caring for his son, Eric Jr. Little did anyone know that day would change their lives forever. Prosecutors revealed that in a fit of rage, Pendland violently shook his son, causing him to go deaf and blind. The consequences were immediate and devastating. The baby was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered the full extent of his injuries: brain bleeding, eye hemorrhages, and an unresponsive state. Medical professionals were left shocked by the severity of the abuse. Assistant Mahoning County Prosecutor Jennifer McLaughlin, in her emotional plea for justice, highlighted the role Pendland should have played in caring for and protecting his son. She pointed out that Eric Jr. was Pendland's biological son, and instead of nurturing him, he caused tremendous harm.
Submit to the court that this entire record is absolutely devoid of any remorse by the defendant.
The prosecution's case was made even stronger by the fact that the boy had to spend 2.5 months in the hospital and go through multiple surgeries. His recovery would be long and difficult, with lasting effects on his life. Eric Jr. survived, but his life would never be the same. The injuries left him permanently disabled, with visual and hearing impairments, a feeding tube, and a wheelchair that he would need for the rest of his life. The bright future he should have had was taken away by his father's actions. As the trial went on, Pendland stuck to his claim of innocence, insisting he was falsely accused and wrongfully convicted. However, his words didn't match the overwhelming evidence against him, leaving everyone in the courtroom shocked. Sharon Lawson, the victim's adoptive mother, took the stand and gave an emotional statement. She talked about the life sentence her son had been given, one that would make him dependent on others to speak for him, be his voice, and advocate for him. Lawson's plea for justice deeply affected everyone in the courtroom. She also shared the painful moment when she saw the 3D images of Eric's brain, showing the trauma he had suffered.
Nothing prepared us for the screaming. Hours and hours of screaming.
Lawson, who had previously fostered children with special medical needs, spoke about the pain she saw her son go through for over a year. Eric Jr. cried in pain for 18 hours a day. His screams, caused by a non-accidental brain injury, were a constant reminder of the horrors he had suffered. As Judge Anthony D'Onofrio prepared to announce the sentence, the tension in the courtroom was intense. The prosecution and the victim's family hoped for justice, while Pendland still insisted on his innocence. Then, the moment of truth arrived. When Judge D'Onofrio handed down the maximum sentence of 11 years, Pendland's anger exploded. He shouted profanities and continued to deny his guilt. The outburst stunned everyone in the courtroom, showing the high emotion involved in the case.
I need do anything wrong.
Both McLaughlin and Lawson were satisfied with the maximum sentence, seeing it as a small piece of justice for the victim. However, they recognized the limits of the legal system. The sentence could never truly make up for the harm done to the boy. The difference between the seriousness of the crime and the available punishment was clear. For the victim's family, the sentencing was a step toward closure. 2 weeks earlier, they had finalized Eric Jr.'s adoption, giving him a loving and supportive home. Although his condition would never improve, the family was committed to making him feel loved and comfortable for the rest of his life. The trial took place at Nassau County Court, where Judge James Daniel oversaw the case of Kimberly Kessler, a 50-year-old woman accused of ended the life of her co-worker, Jolene Cummings, and disposing of her body. Kessler was charged with the first-degree murder of 34-year-old Jolene, a mother of 3. Jolene had been reported missing in May 2018, sparking a search that eventually revealed she had been murdered by Kessler, who had been on the run for over 20 years. Jolene was supposed to pick up her children from her ex-husband, but never showed up, raising alarms. When police contacted Kimberly, who was believed to be the last person to see Jolene, she gave excuses and refused to cooperate, even declining to go to work, which increased suspicions. Throughout the trial, Kimberly displayed behavior commonly associated with a Karen, throwing tantrums and yelling, showing little interest in the proceedings. Her outbursts became so disruptive that she was moved to a separate room to watch the trial via video link. In a desperate attempt to be excused from the trial, Kimberly went on a self-starvation spree, losing a significant amount of weight. She appeared in court severely emaciated, dropping from 196 pounds to just 74 pounds, and was wheeled in on a wheelchair. Despite her attempts to disrupt the trial, the judge ruled that she was mentally fit to stand trial, ignoring her outbursts. However, her disruptive behavior continued throughout the proceedings.
To get rid of the public defender's office. Yeah, exactly. Jordan Beard is Johnson's nephew. Jordan Beard is Jolie's cousin. Jordan Beard is Jolie's cousin. And I refuse this assigned counsel. I refuse the public defender's office. I refuse it. I have refused it. I refuse the public defender's office. They appointed Jordan Beard, Jolie Fleming's cousin.
When Kimberly refused to stay quiet and let the trial proceed without interruptions, she was told to be wheeled out of the courtroom. Even as she was being taken out, she kept shouting loudly, causing more disruptions to the trial.
Sit up here and I'm going to say what I want, when I want, how I want, which you silenced me for years. You've silenced me for years. So let everyone know this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Her accusations were investigated but found to be false and without foundation. It seemed she just wanted to represent herself in court.
We went through and I said, well, what's your basis? And she said the same thing, which was he's related to, I guess, the deputy or director Johnson, which is just factually not true. So it was denied at that time.
The police officers also shared details about her behavior in prison, saying that she would violently refuse to eat, undress, smear feces on the walls, and even throw it at prison staff.
Is completely undressed and has feces smeared on the window.
Court hearings continued without Kimberly being physically present in the courtroom. Her attempts to disrupt the proceedings were unsuccessful. Evidence was presented that proved she had ended the life of her co-worker, Jolene. Her search history showed she had searched for terms like co-worker guilty of murder, missing person, body not found before the incident, and Jolene coming with no body, no crime. Judge James H. Daniel delivered the sentence.
Court will adjudicate Kimberly Kessler, defendant, also known as Jennifer Marie Cyrus, guilty, sentence her to life in prison without any possibility of release or parole.
She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Let's go to the 4th Judicial Circuit Court, where one of the most controversial cases is happening. 12-year-old Christian Fernandez, the youngest person ever charged as an adult in Jacksonville, is about to be sentenced for the murder of his half-brother in March 2011. On March 14, 2011, David Galarraga was left in the care of his older half-brother Christian, who had a history of violence at their Jacksonville home in Florida. While the exact details are unclear, Christian, in a fit of anger, slammed his half-brother's head head into a bookshelf several times. When he saw David was unconscious, he placed him on the bed. When their mother, Bianella Susana, came home, Christian showed her the unconscious child. Instead of calling 911, she wiped the blood off his face, changed his clothes, and put ice on his head. She then spent over 7 hours browsing the internet before finally taking David, who was still unresponsive, to the hospital. Due to his severe injuries, including a fractured skull, David passed away 2 days later. Fernandez was arrested and admitted to ending the life of his brother. In June 2011, he was charged with aggravated child abuse, which was later upgraded to first-degree murder. In February 2013, Fernandez, tried as an adult, pleaded guilty to manslaughter and aggravated battery. He was sentenced to 7 years in juvenile detention. Let's go to South Crown Court, where former officer David Carrick, who worked for the Metropolitan Police, is about to be sentenced. He was arrested in 2021, and after denying his guilt for a year, Carrick finally admitted to multiple crimes that took place between 2003 and 2020. What will the verdict be for this serial rapist? We'll find out soon. Carrick briefly served in the British Army before joining the Metropolitan Police in 2001. For a long time, it was clear that Carrick had a tendency for cruelty, with multiple complaints about his behavior filed with the Metropolitan Police and other British forces. He was even given the nickname Bastard Dave by his colleagues because of how brutal he was. Despite this, Carrick stayed on as a police officer. Between 2003 and 2020, he went on a sexual rampage, repeatedly abusing and raping women in the Hertfordshire area where he lived. His method involved finding victims on dating sites like Tinder and Badoo. His role as a police officer made it easy for the women to trust him. Once they met up, he would assault them. In one case, he met a woman on Tinder, showed her his police ID during their first encounter, bragged about meeting famous people, and talked about owning a pet snake. He then gave her a drink, took her to a hotel room, and assaulted her. In other cases, he used handcuffs and threatened the women to prevent them from reporting him. One woman said he even sent her a photo of his police weapon with the warning, "Remember, I'm the boss." This pattern of abuse finally ended in October 2021 when one of his victims came forward to report him. She had heard about another disgraced officer, Wayne Cousins, who had kidnapped, raped, and murdered Sarah Everard, and this gave her the courage to speak up. Carrick was arrested and charged. Initially, he pleaded not guilty to the charges, but in December 2022, he admitted to 85 serious offenses, including 49 counts of rape against 12 victims. On February 7, 2023, he appeared at South Crown Court for his sentencing.
This makes a total of 36 life sentences. The minimum term you will have to serve before the parole board can think of releasing you is 30 years, 239 days.
The judge sentenced Carrick to 36 life terms, with a minimum of 30 years before he could be eligible for parole. This means his earliest possible parole date would be around May 2nd, 2052. Next is the case of Jennifer Sarr, a mother who abandoned her infant, known as baby boy Horry, on a South Carolina highway in 2008. The case remained unsolved for years until 2020 when Sarr was arrested. Take a seat at the Horry County Courthouse's Circuit Court, where Judge Paul Birch is overseeing the case and ensuring justice is served.
On December 4th, 2008, a newly born baby boy, later known as baby boy Horry, was found off Highway 544 in Meadowbrook Drive. He was found abandoned in a shopping bag, investigators believing he was less than 2 days old.
This is Jennifer Sarr, formerly Rickle, who was a sophomore at Coastal Carolina University when she had a brief relationship with fellow student Ronald Woodham III. In August 2008, she began feeling unwell with numbness in her hands and feet and decided to visit the campus doctor. Sarr claimed that the doctor never told her she was pregnant until December 2008 when she went into labor in her room. She gave birth and then passed out. When she woke up, the baby, a boy, showed no signs of life as he neither moved nor made a sound. Sarr then placed baby Horry in a bag inside a box and left him on the side of Highway 544 along Meadowbrook Drive. The police had trouble identifying the boy or his parents, and after exhausting their leads, the case went cold.
We have received warrants for Miss Jennifer Sarr out of Escambia County, Florida. At the time, she was a CCU student at the time of the incident. Warrants have been issued for homicide by child abuse. And a lot of this was a result of scientific evidence that came to light with our Horry County Police Department.
More than 11 years later, scientific evidence confirmed that Sar was the mother of baby boy Horry, leading to her arrest in March 2020. She was initially charged with homicide by child abuse, which could have resulted in a sentence of 20 years to life without parole. At a hearing before her sentencing, a solicitor read a letter from the father of baby boy Horry, Ronald Woodham III, who did not appear in court. The letter said, "At this time, I ask for privacy and respect for my family as we grieve the loss of my first and only child. I want to thank everyone involved in bringing justice to my baby boy. I also want to thank the Rolling Thunder Motorcycle Club and the community members who made sure my child was never alone on any of his birthdays. Please pray for us during this difficult time as we grieve for baby boy Horry." On September 15th, 2022, Sar pleaded guilty to a much lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter as part of a plea deal.
Fortunately, Sar, you're going to have to go with Columbia. According to your behavior, I have no idea how long you will be up there. It's not going to be a real long time because actually, by law, I've got to give you credit for your jail time.
On June 15, 2023, Jennifer Sar was sentenced to 10 years in prison with 4 years suspended, along with time off for the 2 years she spent under house arrest. This is Deborah Mila. She was sentenced to death and spent 22 years on death row for a crime she didn't commit in Phoenix, Arizona.
My innocence did not matter in their pursuit of a conviction.
Milk's son was found in the desert with 3 fatal wounds. Milka was questioned by Detective Armando Salde Jr., but the interrogation was neither recorded nor reported. He later claimed that Milka confessed to arranging the murder.
She then decided that it'd be best for Christopher Milky.
She was charged with first-degree murder, even though there was no actual record of her admitting to the crime. The state claimed she had planned the shooting, and she was sentenced to death. Over 20 years later, doubts began to arise about Milka's supposed confession to Detective Salde, which Milka has always denied giving.
Absolutely nothing to do with the brutal of my son, Christopher. And I did not give a confession to Mr. Saldate.
It was reported that the court found Detective Salde had a history of lying under oath and violating people's rights during interrogations. Milka's supposed confession was the only direct evidence connecting her to the crime, and after 24 years on death row, her conviction was finally overturned. Listen as she talks about her wrongful conviction.
Losing a child to murder is a devastating tragedy. Being falsely accused of a crime you didn't commit is also a devastating tragedy. Try to imagine that. What happened to me could happen to any one of you.
Milka now walks free. There are no reports of her receiving any compensation. Next, we go to the Shelby County Criminal Court, where Judge James Lamey is overseeing the case of Shenanthia Gardner, a 35-year-old mother who, on July 1st, 2016, murdered 4 of her 5 children at their Shelby County apartment. Although her defense team argued she had a mental illness, Judge Lamey rejected the insanity claim, and Gardner was convicted on 20 charges, including first-degree murder, child abuse, child neglect, and child endangerment. When the story of the 4 young children murdered by their mother became public, the nation was left in shock.
Our community has suffered an egregious act of evil and a tremendous loss today. We were called to the scene of a tragic event where we have 4 young children who have been killed.
The oldest child, 7-year-old Dylann Clayton, who was from a previous relationship, escaped the apartment unharmed and alerted the neighbors. The neighbors reported seeing Gardner come out of the apartment holding a large knife before she went back inside. She had also allegedly contacted her husband, Martin Gardner, the father of the 4 children she had taken the lives of, before the police arrived. Gardner confessed to her crimes before being arrested and taken into custody. At her bench trial, her defense team argued that she suffered from paranoid schizophrenia and had a history of mental health problems. They even mentioned a 2015 incident where Gardner had been extremely paranoid, believing someone was trying to harm her and her family. On that day, she had left work early to pick up her kids and ended up calling her husband late at night while in Corinth, Mississippi, which was about 100 miles from where they lived. The odd part was that she had no family or friends in the area she fled to with the children. Chief Prosecutor Eric Christensen, however, argued that Gardner knew what she was doing. Our position from day one is that she has a mental disease, but we've always felt she understood the wrongfulness of her actions, he said.
I mean, there's really no words for what was witnessed. I mean, you could see with the responding officers all these years later and, you know, their emotion, and it's like it was yesterday for them.
Judge Lamy, however, rejected the insanity claim, finding her guilty of the crime. He acknowledged that she had mental issues, but argued that she was not experiencing a psychological episode on the day of the murders.
Guilty on multiple counts. A judge reached a verdict today saying Cynthia Gardner was able to appreciate the culpability of her actions when she her 4 young children to death.
5 years after the crimes, Gardner was sentenced in February 2022 to life in prison for all 20 charges, with the possibility of parole after serving 51 years.
Count 1, I find you guilty of first-degree murder, sentence you to life with possibility of parole.
As the judge read out her sentence, Gardner sat motionless, showing no emotion, possibly fully aware of the seriousness of her crime and the consequences that followed. In March 2022, 27-year-old Quan Winston was fatally injured in a Wyoming, Michigan apartment. His ex-girlfriend, Sakina Muhammad, was arrested the following day after fleeing with their 11-month-old daughter. Muhammad claimed self-defense, citing previous incidents where Winston had assaulted her, including 2 prior strangulation attempts in March 2020 and January 2022. However, neighbors testified that their relationship was toxic, with Muhammad often being the aggressor. In November 2023, a jury convicted her of first-degree murder and felony firearm possession. On January 17, 2024, Muhammad was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 24 months for the firearm conviction.
As I indicated, the law prescribes a particular penalty for first-degree murder, and that is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And that is what I am imposing today. On the felony firearm, that also requires an additional 24 months of prison time to be served both before and consecutive to the life offense in the case. $60 DNA fee, $136 state cost, $130 crime victim assessment, and $1,000 in court costs. Ms. Muhammad, you do have the right to appeal. And if you'd like to appeal and you cannot afford an attorney to assist you in that regard, fill out that purple sheet that was just handed to you. Please be sure that you get it filed within 42 days of today. That's 6 weeks of today, or your request will be denied. And I genuinely wish you the very best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you. I love you, Mom. I love you, Daddy. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow, baby. Put her in the grinder. Great Kingdom. Great Kingdom. Put her in the grinder. Just like you go when you go in the grinder. Just like you go in.
During sentencing, she expressed remorse to her daughter, while Winston's mother emphasized the family's enduring pain, stating, "Karma has no expiration date." Described as a case like no other by prosecutors, let's look at the case of Catelyn Marin as Judge Charles Temple of Hillsborough County Superior Court sentences the young mother to 45 years to life in prison. Marin was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of her daughter, Brielle Gage, who passed away from blunt force injuries after being severely beaten. On November 25, 2014, Nashua police received a medical call from 14 Oak Street in Nashua. A medical team quickly arrived at the home and found Brielle badly beaten. She was rushed to the hospital, but was sadly declared dead later, with blunt force trauma as the cause of death. Her death was ruled a homicide, and police arrested her mother, Catelyn Marin. Marin admitted to beating her daughter to her end because she had wet herself, and went into the kitchen at night to search for food.
A New Hampshire mother is under arrest tonight, charged with her own 3-year-old daughter. Brielle Gage was rushed to the hospital 2 days before Thanksgiving, and as Paul Burton explains, neighbors had no idea there were any problems in the family's Nashua home.
According to Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Strelson, an autopsy showed that Brielle Gage had over 50 injuries. The child had various bruises all over her body, including several on her ears and face. Marin's live-in boyfriend, Michael Rivera, who testified during the trial, said he saw the abuse but chose to go back to sleep as Marin continued to attack her daughter. Brielle was left on the floor until the emergency call was finally made. It was revealed that Brielle wasn't the first child to be abused by Catelyn Marin. The Division of Children, Youth, and Families had investigated 10 different cases of abuse and neglect against Marin. One child even said they were only allowed to eat once a day. Eventually, Marin and Rivera were arrested, and the children were placed in protective custody. Just 6 months after being released, Marin brutally beat Brielle to her end. In August 2016, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. Judge Charles Temple oversaw her sentencing. Before the sentencing, Judge Temple stated that no matter the punishment, there would be nothing to celebrate that day. He urged those who cared about Brielle to remember her by celebrating her birthday rather than focusing on her demise, and to accept that no funeral would be held for the child.
It's now time to turn the page on her. It's time to celebrate this beautiful little soul who deserved so much more in life.
Marin was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison, a sentence that Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Strelson believed was fair.
Somebody who did something absolutely unspeakable has been brought to some small measure of justice. And I say some small measure of justice because no matter what, that 3-year-old is still and she's terrible.
Judge Temple read out her sentence, and Marin was seen from behind, her shoulders shaking as she broke down in tears. This is Curtis Flowers, who was wrongfully imprisoned for 23 years and sentenced to death for a quadruple murder he reportedly did not commit in Winona, Mississippi. Flowers was 26 when he was fired from his job at a furniture store. 2 weeks later, the store owner and 3 employees were found dead inside. Flowers quickly became a suspect, was arrested, and charged with the murders of all 4 victims. After 6 separate trials, all for the same crime, he was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to death. Investigators later looked into the jury selection and found that the prosecution had racially discriminated during the juror selection in all 6 trials. The case went to the U.S. Supreme Court, which decided to throw out the conviction because of the prosecutor's intentional dismissal of African American jurors. The judge granted Flowers bail, and he is now on house arrest.
The only times that Mr. Flowers is allowed to be away from the location where he will be residing is if he's receiving medical treatment, attending meetings with his attorney.
And now, after 23 years, this is the first time Curtis Flowers is outside of prison.
I don't know. I'm so excited right now. I can't think straight.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
A year later, the state decided not to put Curtis Flowers back on trial and officially dropped all charges. Mississippi announced it would pay Flowers $500,000 for his 23 years of wrongful imprisonment. Next, we have the case of Nicole Kip Miller, who is about to be sentenced at the Bay County Circuit Court after taking the life of a baby. The baby's remains were found in a commercial trash container behind a Bay County store on December 10, 2009. 19-year-old Nicole L. Kip Miller gave birth to a baby boy at her home in Williams Township. Hours later, she went to the Mid-Michigan Medical Center in Midland for medical help. After examining her, doctors confirmed she had recently given birth. When they asked her where the baby was, she gave vague answers and seemed hesitant. Bay County Sheriff's deputies were alerted, and a search for the baby began. In the early morning of December 11, 2009, deputies found the baby's remains in a trash container behind the Mrs. Country Market, close to Kip Miller's home. She was arrested on February 1, 2010, and during interrogation, she claimed the baby was stillborn, which contradicted the autopsy report stating the baby was born alive and passed away from asphyxiation. She was charged with second-degree murder, but on November 30, 2010, the day her trial was supposed to start, Kip Miller pleaded no contest to involuntary manslaughter. Bay County Circuit Judge Joseph K. Sheeran sentenced her to 8 to 15 years in prison for the involuntary manslaughter of her son. On April 25, 2011, police were called to a fire at a house on Georgia Drive, Red Hill, Nottinghamshire. When they arrived, they found the body of 47-year-old Jacqueline Bartam, her two sons, 14-year-old Daniel Bartam, and his younger brother, along with their dog, were unharmed. However, the fire turned out to be no accident. An autopsy revealed that Jacqueline had passed away from head injuries. Initially, Daniel claimed that an intruder had ended the life of his mother, but he later admitted that he had taken her life in a fit of rage after an argument. Investigation showed this was a lie. Before the murder, Daniel had become obsessed with violent video games and horror films, spending much of his time playing games and watching scary movies. He eventually began planning to end the life of his mother. Daniel got the idea from one of his favorite soap operas, Coronation Street, where a character named John Stape murdered a woman with a hammer. When detectives looked at his computer, they found a deleted story where Daniel had written about a character named Daniel Bartam who ended the life of his mother in the same way, by hitting her with a claw hammer 7 times. Afterward, he placed newspapers around her, poured petrol in her bedroom, and set the house on fire.
I now know that Daniel Bartam planned to kill him. He then executed the violent.
The evidence against Daniel was clear. He was arrested and, on February 9, 2012, found guilty of murder. The now 15-year-old Daniel was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 16 years before he could be considered for parole. This next case is deeply disturbing, so prepare yourself as we head to Alabama for the sentencing of a former youth pastor in a case that shocked the community. Actton Bowen, a 38-year-old evangelist and former youth minister, received the maximum sentence for 28 charges related to the sexual abuse of 6 teenagers in Etowah County. He was convicted of second-degree sodomy, sexual abuse, and other crimes. The investigation into Bowen began in April 2018, leading to his arrest in Jefferson County after a 3-week investigation by the Hoover Police Department's Special Victims Unit. The victims, who were teenagers and young adults, came forward to report years of abuse that spanned from 2006 to April 2018. Their statements described how Bowen used gifts, trips, and money to lure them into situations where he could be alone with them. One victim shared the lasting impact of Bowen's actions, saying, "I saw myself as damaged goods without realizing I'd been manipulated by a true professional." During the trial, Bowen pleaded guilty, claiming he did so to spare the victims from having to relive their trauma. In an emotional apology, he blamed alcohol, drug abuse, and pornography addiction for his actions. But his remorse came too late, as the damage was already done. His defense team argued that he had PTSD due to being abused as a teenager, presenting witnesses who confirmed he had spoken to psychologists about his past. They asked the court to consider this as a mitigating factor in his sentencing. However, Judge Deborah Jones refused to show leniency and gave him the maximum sentence for every charge. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Jody Willoughby, rejected the defense's argument, calling it an attempt to shift attention away from Bowen's crimes. Willoughby stated, "It just reassures the selfish nature of Actton Bowen that it's still all about him." It was also revealed that Bowen faced additional charges in Bay County, Florida, for inappropriate conduct with teenage boys across state lines. The exact details of these charges remain unclear. His arrest in 2018 shocked the Christian community in East Alabama, where he was once seen as a role model. He had served as a chaplain for the 2012 Olympics, made appearances on Fox News, and was known as a spiritual advisor to Hollywood stars, including Justin Bieber. He also worked with students at Coosa Christian School and was a youth minister at the now-closed Cross Point Community Church in Etowah County. Despite his accomplishments, Bowen became consumed by his own demons. After pleading guilty to 28 charges, he received the maximum sentence for each one to be served consecutively. His total sentence came to an overwhelming 1,008 years. One thing is certain, Bowen will spend the rest of his life in prison. On June 3, 2024, in North Olmsted, Ohio, 33-year-old Bianca Ellis fatally stabbed Julian Wood and injured his mother, Margot Wood, in the parking lot of a Giant Eagle supermarket. Authorities reported that Ellis stole 2 knives from a nearby thrift store before following the mother and child into the parking lot, where she attacked them without prior interaction. Following her arrest, Ellis was indicted on multiple charges, including aggravated murder, attempted murder, felonious assault, endangering children, tampering with evidence, and theft. In September 2024, a Cuyahoga County judge ruled Ellis incompetent to stand trial and ordered her to undergo treatment at North Coast Behavioral Health Care with the possibility of restoring her competency. By February 2025, after undergoing treatment, Ellis was deemed competent to stand trial.
In setting a trial date, it gives all the parties the opportunity to prepare for trial if that's the next phase that we need to get to. I always say to the individual who's sitting in my courtroom that you have the ability to discuss this case with your lawyers. They have the ability to discuss this case with the state of Ohio. I do not become involved in any of those discussions. My job is to get you to a jury trial if that's how you want to proceed, and I will protect your constitutional rights that way as a judge. If in fact the lawyers and you and the parties do have a resolve of this matter, of course my job as the judge then is to take a knowing and intelligent change of plea and to handle the sentencing of this matter. So that's my job, and it looked even in the discussions that you had with North Coast that you understood how the proceedings are to move forward, and you understand my role as the judge in this case. So all I say to you is, to the left and right of you, you have two very competent, well-respected lawyers here in Cuyahoga County and the state of Ohio. So please speak to them, and they'll advise you accordingly. I'm going to set a trial date. I know my bailiff had an opportunity to speak to the lawyers in their calendar, knowing that for me it's a move forward today. So just as I would in any case, the Supreme Court would tell me I have 6 months at the most. What I like to do is set this for July 14th for trial. And I think that we met with all of your calendars. So Ms. Ellis will set a July 14th trial date of this case. So if it isn't resolved in some other manner, you'll know that you'll move forward with picking a jury. I also have a final pretrial, and that's set for, I believe, June 18th. And I think looking at your calendars, it might be around noon that will set the final pretrial. And Ms. Ellis, at that final pretrial, we talk about the trial and how we'll move forward with the trial. And if it's an opportunity to resolve the case, we'll talk about those things as well.
Her trial is scheduled to begin on July 14th, 2025, with a final pretrial hearing set for June 18th, 2025. Authorities have described the incident as a random act of violence, noting that Ellis had no prior interactions with the victims before the attack. Take a seat at Suffolk County Court, where the judge is about to sentence former NYPD officer Michael Valva in one of the most heartbreaking cases ever seen by a Long Island jury. Valva was being sentenced for the death of his son, who was forced to sleep in the family's freezing garage. On January 17, 2020, Suffolk County Police received a call from Valva's home on Long Island. According to the report, his son, Thomas, had fallen in the driveway while trying to catch the school bus and lost consciousness. Officers arrived to find Valva performing CPR on the boy, whose body temperature was only 76 degrees. Thomas was rushed to the hospital, but was pronounced dead. However, investigation soon revealed that his death was not an accident. Michael Valva lived with his 3 sons, his fiancée Angelina Polina, and her 3 daughters in a home on Bittersweet Lane in Center Mauritius. Thomas and his older brother Anthony were both autistic and had been suffering from abuse at the hands of Valva and Polina. Evidence from the couple's home security system showed that both boys were forced to spend 16 hours in the garage on a freezing night with no heater, mattress, blankets, or bathroom access. At some point, 8-year-old Thomas woke up on the cement floor and soiled his pants. Security footage showed Valva yelling at his son and ordering him to go outside in the cold to hose himself off with water. While outside, Thomas lost consciousness and collapsed face down several times on the concrete patio. Despite how serious the situation was, Valva waited at least an hour before calling 911. By the time Thomas was taken to the hospital, he had passed away from complications caused by hypothermia. Valva and Polina were arrested. During his trial in 2022, despite the clear evidence of abuse, Valva cried and claimed he never meant for his son to die.
Never in my worst nightmare will I imagine being responsible for Thomas's.
In November 2022, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and 4 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. On June 23, 2022, Grand Rapids Police Department officers responded to reports of firing in the 800 block of Martin Luther King Jr., Street SE. Upon arrival, they discovered 58-year-old Tony Dwayne Vaughn and 58-year-old Freddie James Lusk seriously injured. Despite life-saving efforts, both men were pronounced dead at the scene. The Kent County Medical Examiner conducted autopsies, confirming that both deaths were homicides. Subsequent investigations led to the arrest of 25-year-old Deante Craft, who was charged with 2 counts of open murder, carrying a concealed weapon, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. In June 2024, a jury found Craft guilty on all charges. During the sentencing hearing on July 24, 2024, family members of the victims addressed the court. One of Vaughn's daughters expressed the profound impact of her father's death, noting that his birthday, which coincided with the day of the murder, had transformed from a celebration to a day of mourning. She stated, "The day he left us, we went from planning a birthday party to planning a funeral on the same day."
Turn to the podium.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And Mr. Lockman, did you have any additional statement on behalf of the people?
I do not.
And Mr. Cordes' statement?
Just to reiterate what was in the pre-sentence report, I've always found Mr. Craft to be pleasant, positive, and polite in all of our dealings, and I know he is going to file an appeal in this matter, so with that, we'd ask the court go ahead with sentencing.
All right, and Mr. Craft, did you have anything that you would like to say before I sentence you?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, Mr. Craft, at this point, you are 26 years old, and you have 5 prior felonies and 8 prior misdemeanors, and we're here for you to be sentenced regarding this incident that occurred back in June of 2022, June 23rd to be exact, where you, along with at least one other person, apparently made the decision to end the lives of Mr. Lusk and Mr. Vaughn. You were found guilty after evidence was presented to a jury. You had a jury trial. There was a lot of evidence presented, including some Ring camera footage. There was some video from a store from across the street. That, along with all of the other evidence presented, led to you being convicted of this double homicide, as well as being a felon in possession of a firearm which you were ineligible to possess, carrying a concealed weapon, and then 3 counts of felony firearm. I want to say to the family members that spoke and those who didn't, that I am sorry for your loss. Better yet, I am sorry that the lives of these men were stolen from you, that your father was stolen from you, that your uncle was stolen from you. You are definitely understandably angry in this moment. I was glad to hear Ms. Crump state that she does not have hatred towards this defendant, because that hatred would only serve to continue to victimize you for years to come, as opposed to having you focused on continuing to represent your father's legacy, which is obviously more important. And Mr. Craft, I don't know, obviously your actions had a ripple effect. I don't know if you didn't think of the ripple effect or simply didn't care. Your actions in this case are simply inexplicable, and this is just a needless tragedy. I'm not sure what more I can say with respect to that, and there are mandatory sentences in this case, so what I'm going to do is sentence you in accordance with those mandatory sentences, which means that for counts 4, 5, 6, and 7, which are this carrying a concealed weapon and the 3 felony firearm charges, you're going to receive 716 days credit for all of those. For the felony firearms, I'm sentencing you to the 2-year mandatory sentence. For the carrying a concealed weapon, I am sentencing you to 4 to 5 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, which will be served consecutively to the felony firearm charges. I'm sorry, the CCW will not be consecutive. It will be running concurrently. In addition to that, for counts 1 and 2, which are the homicides of Mr. Lusk and Mr. Vaughn, I'm sentencing you to the mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. And this, you'll receive credit for 0 days. This sentence will have to run consecutively to the felony firearm charges. And I'm also sentencing you to, for the counts 3 and 4, which are the felon in possession and the carrying concealed weapon, I'm sentencing you to 4 to 5 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. That's in accordance and within the guidelines scored for those particular counts. In addition to that, Mr. Craft, you will be responsible for $476 state minimum cost, $130 crime victim rights assessment, and $1,000 in court costs. You do have 42 days to appeal this sentence, Mr. Craft, and if you'd like a court-appointed attorney to represent you in an appeal, you have 42 days to make that request. And that's what the purple sheet is for, that the deputy will give you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Bardish?
Judge Christina Elmore, presiding over the case, highlighted Craft's prior convictions and the senseless nature of the crimes. She remarked, "Your actions in this case are simply inexplicable, and this is just a needless tragedy." Next, we move to the sentencing of John White in Isabella County Court in a case that may leave you feeling disgusted.
He was Satan in a costume of a pastor.
In a small Michigan community, tragedy struck when local minister John D. White was charged with the murder of his fiancee's 24-year-old daughter, Rebecca Gay. He faced charges of open murder and first-degree premeditated murder. The shocking details of the crime revealed that White had acted on a disturbing sexual fantasy. White, a 55-year-old ex-convict and self-proclaimed pastor, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and being a habitual offender with multiple prior convictions. According to police reports, White admitted to carefully planning and carrying out the murder. He confessed to drinking several beers before going to Gay's mobile home, where he hit her on the head multiple times with a mallet and then strangled her with a zip tie. While he admitted to undressing her body, he claimed he could not remember if he followed through with his fantasy of abusing her corpse. After disposing of Gay's body, White returned to her home, dressed her young son in his Halloween costume, and later dropped the child off with his father, all while knowing that his mother was dead. His actions were calculated and showed no concern for anyone impacted by his crime. Isabella County Sheriff Leo Miodaszewski revealed that White had known Gay for some time and had been trusted to care for her son while she worked, though they were not close. Despite his role as a pastor and ties to the church, White showed no remorse. The sheriff described the situation as tragic, saying White viewed Gay as an object of attraction. The case shocked White's small congregation of about 14 members. Donna Hooten, a church elder who had helped hire White as pastor 3 years earlier at Christ Community Fellowship, was in disbelief. White had claimed to have found religion and turned his life around after serving time for past crimes. However, he had a violent history, including a probation sentence for choking and stabbing a girl in 1981. In 2012, his dark past resurfaced in a horrifying way. At first, Hooten defended White, believing he was innocent, but when she learned of his confession, she changed her view, saying, "I protested his innocence until I had the absolute news that he confessed. Then he had no leg to stand on." Before his arrest, White had even reached out to Houghton, asking her to start a prayer chain for Gay, who was still missing at the time, further proving how calculated he was. As Rebecca Gay's mother spoke in court before his sentencing, White showed no remorse at all.
"You are an empty shell who is not capable of feeling love or remorse. Your choices have made you what you are. Anyone who can scheme, plan, and carry out such a horrible act deserves to spend the rest of their life in jail."
When faced with his sentence, White's lack of remorse came as no surprise. Given that he had previously used an insanity plea to avoid a harsher sentence, it was clear he had no real guilt or empathy. He was sentenced to 56 years in prison. Just before his sentencing, he had this to say.
I see no reason why you should ever be released.
A few months after being incarcerated, White took his own life. In July 2023, 33-year-old Matthew Ziegler drove to the Ravenna Police Department in Ohio, where he vandalized a marked police cruiser parked in front of the station. Officers observed him via surveillance cameras and confronted him outside. Ziegler immediately charged at the officers, attempting to strike one in the face. Despite being tased by a second officer, he continued his assault, eventually grabbing the second officer around the neck, causing both to fall to the ground. During the struggle, Ziegler attempted to seize the officer's holstered duty weapon, but was unsuccessful. Additional officers arrived and managed to subdue and arrest him. Fortunately, none of the officers sustained serious injuries during the altercation. Ziegler was indicted on charges of aggravated robbery and 2 counts of assault on a peace officer. He pleaded guilty to these charges on April 5, 2024. On May 29, 2024, Portage County Common Pleas Judge Becky L. Doherty sentenced him to a total of 12 years in prison.
But again, you have to serve the 3-year firearm specification initially, then the 8-year sentence with the indefinite portion being a maximum of 12 years on that particular offense, plus the 1 year on the assault on peace officers. Upon your release from prison, you will be supervised for anywhere from 2 years to 5 years by the Adult Parole Authority. If you violate their rules while you're on parole, they can send you back to prison for up to half of your original sentence. And if you commit a new felony, that time could be run consecutively with whatever you have left on your post-release control time, up to 1 year. From my sentence, you have a right to appeal within 30 days of my sentencing entry. If you can't afford an attorney, one would be provided to you, and if you can't afford the documents, they've been provided to you without cost as well. And under federal law, you may not own or possess a firearm, even one belonging to somebody else. You can be charged with. I am not imposing a fine at this point. I am going to impose court costs, which are $336. If you cannot afford to pay the court costs, you can perform community work service in prison. I will allow that at $11 an hour in order to take care of those court costs. Mr. Ziegler, again, you will serve 3 years on the firearm specification and then begin the 9 to 12-year sentence. I hope that you receive the mental health and substance abuse assistance that you need, because you will be released at some point. You will be back out into the community. This is certainly not a life sentence, and you are a young man. But this behavior is honestly too dangerous, too threatening to the well-being of the community and the officers and yourself. And I hope that when you are ultimately released by the institution, that you are stabilized, that you do conduct yourself in the future in certainly a manner far different than what you have done so far. You're still young, and you have a lot of time to turn this around and make this maybe something positive for you and for others in the future.
This sentence comprises 3 years for a firearms specification, which must be served prior to a 9-year term for the other offenses. Judge Doherty acknowledged Ziegler's acceptance of responsibility, but emphasized that a significant prison sentence was warranted due to his behavior and disregard for the well-being of the officers and himself. The sentencing of Brian Wendt, a powerful member of the Hells Angels, followed a major action by the Department of Justice in 2017. The department indicted several Hells Angels members, including Wendt, for their involvement in a large conspiracy. The charges included serious crimes such as murder, drug trafficking, assault, robbery, extortion, illegal firearms possession, and obstruction of justice. Along with Wendt, Jonathan Nelson and Russell Taylor were also named in the case. The investigation and trial focused on the murder of Joel Silva, a fellow Hells Angels member. Nelson and Wendt targeted Silva over issues within the club. Prosecutors argued that Nelson planned Silva's murder and worked with Wendt to carry it out. The murder took place in Fresno in 2014, with Wendt coldly firing at Silva's head at the Fresno chapter's clubhouse. Silva's body was cremated the next day, which destroyed important evidence.
FBI agents have revealed a homicide that happened inside the Hells Angels clubhouse in Fresno 3.
The conspiracy to take Silva's life is said to be more complicated than originally thought. It was allegedly planned by Brian Wendt, president of the Fresno charter of the Hells Angels, Christopher Ranieri, president of the Salem charter, and Jonathan Nelson, president of the Sonoma charter. The plan stretched across California to Massachusetts, showing just how powerful the Hells Angels are. The FBI used the racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations, RICO, Act to build their case, which led to life sentences for each of them. The RICO Act, passed in 1970, targets organized crime and criminal groups. The Hells Angels are one of the most powerful organizations worldwide and the largest biker gang globally. Founded in 1948, the club now has 425 chapters around the world, from the US to Berlin to Mexico. There are two main theories about the club's origins. One says the Hells Angels formed on March 17, 1948 in Fontana, California, when smaller motorcycle clubs merged. Otto Friedli, a World War II veteran, is credited with starting the club after a conflict with a rival gang in the Pissed Off Bastards Motorcycle Club. The other theory links the club's founding to Dick White, a member of the Redlands Roadrunners, who allegedly started it on November 15, 1951 in San Bernardino. The Hells Angels' famous Death's Head emblem was designed by Frank Selig, former president of the San Francisco charter. The club uses a patch system similar to military medals, where each patch represents a member's actions or beliefs. The patch is a symbol of the club's brotherhood and code, and it must never be destroyed. Becoming a Hells Angels member is a tough process. It takes commitment and loyalty. To become a full member, a person first has to demonstrate their dedication, secure a sponsor, and get unanimous approval from their chapter. This process can take years, and a person must first be a hang-around before becoming a prospect. After that, they go through a final vote by the chapter. If the majority agrees, they become a full member. It can take up to 10 years to achieve full membership. According to Neil Hall's book, Hell to Pay, Hells Angels versus the $1 Million Rat, a candidate must have known a full member personally for at least 5 years to be considered worthy. Former East Cleveland Police Chief Scott Gardner was sentenced on March 21, 2024 to 5 years of probation and 600 hours of community service after pleading guilty to one felony count of collecting and failing to remit sales tax. This charge was related to his private security business, Constant Protective Security CPACS, which collected sales tax that was not properly remitted to the state over several years.
So for each year you engaged in this scam, you'll do 100 hours of community service. I would certainly, I would never, over any point in that 5 years you're on probation to me, I'd never forget that I'm giving you a chance, that your judge gave you a chance, right? But that's all it is. If it turns out that Ms. Soul and the state of Ohio is right, and you just don't have it in you to do good, then you'll make a mistake over these 5 years and you'll end up going to prison. On the other hand, I hope that just like me, on some level, the state of Ohio is rooting for you to do well, right? The goal of this is to see people not recidivize. The goal of this is to correct behavior. And there ought to be punishment. The punishment is the 600 hours of community service. But the hope is that over the course of the next 5 years, even if it's only out of fear, the state of Ohio won't have to worry about you stealing from the state anymore because of that heightened anxiety that your freedom is at stake. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Normally, it's the court's inclination to create incentives for people to do well on community control. And so I always look for ways to consider terminating community control early. So I would commonly put people on maybe 5 years of community control, but I'll say, look, if you can show me a year of sobriety, 12 straight months, we'll terminate your probation. But I want you to understand, I'm not going to do that in this case. I want there to be some certainty that you're being supervised for as long a period of time as I possibly can. So that's maybe the one dissimilarity to the way I'm treating you and I might someone else. I want you to be supervised for as long as the law allows me to do it, and that's the 5 years. So while you're on community control, you'll report monthly. You'll be drug tested. You will have to maintain verifiable employment. You are on a habitual offenders list, so you can't operate a business in the state of Ohio. You'll have to have some sort of verifiable employment. I'll give you some flexibility there because I understand that you are retired, but there's going to have to be some work. You'll have to show that you're doing some work in addition to just the community service. As I indicated, you will be drug tested. I don't know if there's a drug issue here. Maybe there's not.
None whatsoever, Your Honor.
That's fine. I'm happy to hear that. But on the off chance that there should come a time where you test positive for an illegal substance, I want you to understand, I'm not going to incarcerate you for that. We'll talk more, and we'll figure out a way to help you if there is a drug issue that should arise. And to that end, I want you to be forthcoming with our probation department. If there are issues that you have that maybe haven't been addressed in open court, maybe they're too private to discuss in open court, discuss them with your probation officer. Develop a relationship with the probation officer so that you can speak with that person. We have a fantastic probation department. Bless you. I certainly hope that you're able to pay this money back. I don't want you to think that just because maybe on some level I've had some harsh words for you, Mr. Gardner, that I want to see you do poorly. To the contrary, my hope is that this sentence will have the net effect of you doing well and extricating yourself from the system and never having to go through this again. Do you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Soul, anything else on behalf of the state?
As part of a plea deal, Gardner agreed to pay $149,954 in restitution. In exchange, prosecutors dropped 23 other charges, including aggravated theft, telecommunications fraud, and money laundering. Gardner's defense attributed the issue to poor record keeping rather than intentional wrongdoing. Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Judge Jeffrey P. Saffold, when delivering the sentence, emphasized that while Gardner's actions tarnished the badge, they did not warrant prison time given the non-violent nature of the offense and his lack of prior felony convictions. At the Saginaw County Circuit Court, Judge Darnell Jackson oversaw the case of Kenneth Blue, a former Michigan officer who brutally murdered his girlfriend and their unborn baby, then tried to make it look like a suicide. On August 30th, 2011, 32-year-old Jennifer Webb, who was 8.5 months pregnant, was found dead in her vehicle. She had an extension cord tied around her neck, hanging from the roof rack of the car. Two Buena Vista Township police officers, Kenneth Blue and Tim Patterson, discovered her body. Officer Patterson initially thought it was a suicide and reported it, but he felt something wasn't right. Officer Blue was supposed to be on duty at 10 p.m., but he didn't show up for about 30 minutes and didn't respond to attempts to reach him by radio, patrol car computer, or phone. Concerned, Officer Patterson drove around to find Blue. He eventually spotted Blue's patrol car with its spotlight on a Pontiac Aztek. When Blue saw Patterson, he acted nervous and stalled before mentioning the body. Patterson noticed noticed that Blue appeared sweaty and anxious, which was strange for an officer used to seeing crime scenes. Blue also had a red spot in his eye that was turning black and blue. When officers informed Webb's parents about her demise, they didn't believe she was suicidal. They told detectives that their daughter had been excited about her baby and had shown them her preparations. They also identified Blue as the father of the baby and said their daughter had planned to meet him that night. This information helped connect the dots. It turned out that Officer Blue, who was married, had been having an affair with Webb. He had strangled her, causing her demise. Further evidence at the crime scene pointed to Blue. Investigators found a cigarette butt matching his DNA, traces of his blood on the electric cord, Webb's clothing, and his uniform. Blue was arrested and convicted of first-degree premeditated murder in October 2012. At his sentencing on November 5th, 2012, Judge Jackson sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In March 2013, during his trial in Summit County, Ohio, Richard Beasley testified in his own defense against charges of aggravated murder and other offenses. Beasley, known as the Craigslist Killer, was accused of luring men with false job offers posted on Craigslist, leading to their robbery and murder. On the stand, Beasley claimed he was an informant for the Akron Police Department, suggesting that his interactions were part of his role in assisting law enforcement.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm, excuse me, that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, as you shall answer to God or your counsel or the truth? I do. All right, sir, thank you. Have a seat.
As a machinist?
I worked as a hydraulics assembly technician, but it's a related field.
Eventually, you and Brogan Rafferty and Scott Davis all end up in the same car?
Yes.
And that would have been Brogan Rafferty's car?
Sure would have. His Buick.
And where were you in the car?
I was in the front seat on the passenger side.
And Brogan was driving?
Yes.
And where was Mr. Davis?
He was sitting behind me.
Right. Now, you didn't recognize him when you saw him, right?
Pardon?
You didn't recognize Scott Davis as having seen him or known him before?
No, I did not.
Right. Now, would you describe in your own words then what happened after you got to the location where you were going to actually physically get out of the car and look at the farm?
Oh, well, we went down to the farm and looked at the farm. And he was undecided as to whether or not he was going to take the job or not. He said, let me think about it. He said, by the time we get back to town where my truck's at, I'll have you an answer. So we left, and we went back up the drive, and instead of making a right to go directly back to town, Brogan made a left. And I asked him, I said, Brogan, why are we going this way? He said, well, this goes along the back of the farm, and so he can see where the rest of the farm's at. And we go down this road, and this road is trash. There's been a partial mudslide or something, and there's gravel and there's ruts. And Brogan's car is dragging real bad. And he said, guys, we're never going to make it to the bottom with all this weight in here. I thought we could get through. I'm going to let you off down here, go around and turn around, and we'll go back the other way. And at that point, he had picked a wide spot in the road, and he let Scott and I out, and he went down the hill to turn around and come back.
You mean Brogan did?
Brogan did. He was driving the car, yes.
So he drove the car down to turn the car around?
To turn the car around.
Right. And you and Scott Davis did what?
Scott Davis then pulled out a revolver and pointed it at my head. And I threw my hands up and about urinated in my pants. And I just said, why? And he explained why. He said, brother, you're a weak link.
Now, tell us what you have learned in your years of connection with these violent motorcycle gangs, what that phrase means.
It means he knew I was a rat, an informant. And a weak link is used to describe somebody who either is a snitch or they think is going to snitch. And it's usually used as in you have to take the weak link out of the chain.
And
That's pretty well known among anybody familiar with that environment.
Now, in fact, is that true? Were you a...
I sure was.
Well, let me finish now.
Go ahead.
Were you a weak link or a snitch?
Yes, I was.
And tell me about that. Was that here in Akron or someplace else?
That was here in Akron.
And who were you dealing with here in Akron?
Initially, I dealt with Officer Alan Jones, who was on the street narcotics squad, but I had bought him information on multiple times involving motorcycle gangs, so he hooked me up with Lieutenant Keith Meadows of the Akron Police Department, who was the gang officer who specifically dealt with motorcycle gangs.
After he said you were a weak link brother,
Yes.
while pointing his at you, what happened?
It misfired 3 times, about 2 feet from my face, and I ran in the woods, and he ran after me. I fell. I'm just not in a condition to run. He got on top of me. We were wrestling over the... It misfired, then it fired, then it misfired. So 1 time out of 6 times, and at a glance, I would say it was an old. It was pitted. That's all I can remember, and it was a revolver. And he had his 6 shots, and he yelled when it went off, and when it went off, it went bang quick. In other words, he was continually pulling the trigger. So he yelled, and I pushed him away, and he just kind of pushed away, and I said, "That's your 6." So if he was going to kill me, he had to do it with his hands.
Did you know whether or not he was apparently struck with one of the bullets?
I thought he was from the way he reacted, and I thought it hit him in the arm. Because of the way we were wrestling around, I had one hand on his hand and the gun was pointed up.
Prosecutors contended that Beasley orchestrated a scheme to rob and fatally harm his victims. The trial concluded with Beasley's conviction on multiple counts, resulting in a death sentence. Get ready for another shocking case at Escambia County District Court, where 50-year-old Michael Neely is about to be sentenced. Neely was found guilty of murdering his police chief and best friend after a drunken fight at a Pensacola Beach, Florida hotel. In November 2019, Michael Neely and his police chief, Lucky Miller, traveled from Oklahoma to Pensacola for a law enforcement conference at the Hilton Pensacola Beach Hotel. They shared a room, and everything seemed fine until hotel staff started receiving complaints about noise from their room. A security guard went to check and found Neely sitting on top of Miller, mumbling. When paramedics arrived, they found Miller unresponsive, with his face badly beaten, his right eye swollen shut. Neely's right hand was also swollen and red. Forensic reports showed that Miller had suffered 5 blunt force injuries to his head before he passed away. Both men were heavily drunk and got into a physical fight. A nearby guest reported hearing a loud noise followed by someone repeatedly saying, "Stop it, Mike!" Neely had a blood alcohol level of 0.294, while Miller's was 0.334 at the time of his death. When questioned, Neely claimed he had no memory of what happened.
I would like to know what happened. Because I'm telling you, I don't have any memory of any.
None of this changed the outcome in court, as Neely was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Lucky Miller on March 30th, 2021, and was set to be sentenced on April 29th. Neely's wife, who attended the sentencing hearing, pleaded with the judge for leniency, saying, "Mike would never intentionally hurt someone. I've lived with him for 21 years. I know this. Please have leniency and mercy upon us." In contrast, Miller's father asked the judge for the harshest possible punishment for second-degree murder. In the end, justice was served, and Neely was sentenced to life in prison for the beating that led to Lucky Miller's demise. Grant Amato, a 29-year-old man, is currently in Seminole County Jail, facing 3 counts of first-degree premeditated murder for the killings of his parents and brother. Despite pleading not guilty, he has been unable to post his $750,000 bond. Amato has reportedly been attempting to secure his release by offering exclusive interviews to journalists in exchange for money to help him make bail. In a recent email to a New York journalist, he even asked if they knew any millionaires who could could fund his release, promising them exclusive rights to his story in return. So far, no one has accepted his offers, and he remains behind bars. If he were to post bond, the judge has ruled that he would not be allowed access to computers or the internet, must wear a monitoring device, and cannot have contact with witnesses. The case is ongoing, and Amato continues to deny involvement in his family's murders. In August 2016, 17-year-old Brianna Nicole Fluitt was recruited by two Cleveland men, Keyshawn Newell, then 19, and Jeffrey Doss, then 22, to participate in an armed robbery at a Citizens Bank in Northfield Village, Ohio. Surveillance images from the robbery, released shortly thereafter, showed Fluitt and Doss inside the bank. Fearing that Fluitt might expose them after the images became public, Doss instructed Newell to end her life.
Mr. Newell, the 3-year firearm specification in count 1 aggravated and count 4 kidnapping do not merge for purposes of sentencing and must be served prior to and consecutive to the underlying offenses. You were convicted of count 1, the aggravated murder of Brianna Fluitt. You are hereby sentenced to serve 3 years on the firearm specification to be served prior to and consecutive to the 3-year firearm specification and the kidnapping. The total of 6 years on the firearm specifications will be served prior to and consecutive to a sentence of life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. With regard to the criminal gang specification in count 1, you are sentenced to an additional 3 years to be served consecutive to the underlying count. As to count 4 kidnapping, you are hereby sentenced to 10 years in prison to run consecutive to the sentence in count 1.
On August 19, 2016, Newell lured Fluitt from her East Cleveland home, drove her to a vacant lot, and inflicted fatal injuries on her. The case took a significant turn when Newell's mother contacted police after hearing her son boast about the murder. This information was crucial in leading to his arrest.
Count 8, tampering with evidence with the 1-year firearm specification. You are sentenced to 1 year on the firearm specification and 12 months on the tampering to be served concurrent to the sentence already imposed. Count 9, theft with the 1-year firearm specification. You are sentenced to 12 months to be served concurrent to the 1-year firearm specification and concurrent to the sentence already imposed. Finally, as to count 10, having weapons while under disability, you are sentenced to 12 months to be served concurrent to the sentence imposed for an aggregate sentence of life with the possibility of parole after 49 years.
In November 2017, Newell was found guilty of aggravated murder, felonious assault, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, and theft. During his sentencing, he apologized to Fluitt's family, but denied involvement in her demise, stating, "I really didn't do this, and one day I hope to be able to prove that."
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Newell.
I just wanted to state that even though I was found guilty by a jury, I do respect them. I do respect their findings and their verdict. But at the same time, I do want the family to know I send them my deep apologies for what happened to their loved one. And I want to send them my condolences and let them know that I really didn't do this, and one day I hope to be able to prove that.
With regard to any financial sanctions, I have considered your present and future ability to pay and find that you are indigent. There will be no imposition of fines and the court costs are waived. Mr. Newell, you have the right to appeal this matter within 30 days after the filing of the court sentencing entry. If you're unable to pay for an appeal, you are entitled to have a notice of appeal filed without the payment of a filing fee. If you're unable to obtain counsel, counsel will be appointed at no cost to you. Mr. Newell, do you wish for the court to appoint an appellate attorney in this case?
Yes.
The court appoints Attorney Jay Schlackett to represent you on your appeal. You will receive credit for time served in the amount of 458 days. This court is adjourned.
All right.
The judge sentenced Newell to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 49 years. Co-defendant Doss awaited trial on similar charges, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, and robbery. In February 2017, Nasser Hamad was involved in a fatal incident outside his residence in Howland Township, Ohio. The incident stemmed from a prolonged dispute between Hamad and the family of his girlfriend, Tracy Hendrickson. On February 25th, 5 individuals, Joshua Haber, Joshua Williams, April Vokes, John Shively, and Bryce Hendrickson arrived at Hamad's home, leading to a physical altercation. Hamad retreated into his house, retrieved a firearm, and opened fire on the group, resulting in the deaths of Haber and Williams and serious injuries to the others. In October 2017, Hamad was convicted on 2 counts of aggravated murder and 6 counts of attempted aggravated murder. During sentencing, he expressed dissatisfaction with his legal representation, asserting, "I wasn't represented right."
There's a permanent hole in our family that will never heal, and that's our life sentence.
My prayer is for this man to never be out of prison and able to do this to any other family again.
I lost my freedom because of these gangsters.
But Nasser Hamad had a lot to say too.
I hope karma comes, and I really believe that the lies is going to come out.
The court sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years.
It is unfortunate that after 47 years of dedicating yourself to your family and working hard to maintain your own business, you allowed such foolishness to reduce you to such a state.
Hamad maintained his innocence, stating, "The truth will come out." While serving his sentence, Hamad was diagnosed with terminal kidney cancer in January 2018. Despite efforts to secure his release for medical treatment, he remained incarcerated and passed away in September 2018 at the age of 49. In June 2021, Audrey Rose Nickerson was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the negligent homicide of her daughter in Butte, Montana. In December 2020, after using methamphetamine, Nickerson fell asleep in her car with her infant daughter on her chest. She awoke to find her daughter unresponsive, having been accidentally smothered. During the sentencing, Nickerson addressed District Judge Kurt Kruger, expressing remorse for her actions.
Every moment of every day, I'm in an invisible battle that ever rages on, and none of my pleas or my prayers will bring my beautiful daughter back. This is the most catastrophic event to happen in the history of our family, and it has opened my eyes to many things I've failed to see before. Because of my addiction and my poor choices, our beautiful baby girl is no longer with us, but waiting for us in heaven. I failed as Delray's mother, as her protector. And I will never stop wondering about all the what ifs and the if onlys. But I have decided to pull myself together and live through Delray already. I hope to help others one day who struggle with substance abuse and mental illness by turning my life around and by leading by example. And with the help from my husband, who has proved to be honorable, devoted, and loyal to our family, as well as the steadfast support from my mother, stepmother, and my father-in-law, I believe my chances of success are greatly increased.
This is a tragic and difficult case. In our society, a person is responsible for the welfare of a child and should be expected to protect a child without posing an imminent threat to his or her safety. This matter is truly tragic on a multitude of levels. The defendant has a childhood history of abuse, neglect, and addiction, and she's continued to struggle in her adult life, with addiction and mental illness. The defendant has brought her children into the same world that she grew up in. Would the defendant please stand? It's the judgment of this court that I hereby sentence the defendant, Audrey Rose Nickerson, to the Montana State Women's Prison for a period of 20 years, with 6 of those years to be hereby suspended.
Judge Kruger emphasized the tragic consequences of substance abuse and the irreversible loss resulting from Nickerson's negligence. 2012, in Sheffield Village, Ohio, 26-year-old Royce Kowalczyk, while impaired, caused a head-on collision that led to the tragic loss of Terry Martin, a Cleveland clinic nurse. At the time of the accident, Kowalczyk was out on bond for a previous drug-related case. In February 2013, Lorain County Court Judge James Miraldi sentenced Kowalczyk to 6 years in prison for aggravated vehicular homicide, imposed fines totaling $11,375, and revoked his driver's license for life.
Probably got away with many times without there being any consequences to anyone but himself. And because it happened so many times, that maybe he'd be using drugs or partying with somebody, with a friend or by himself, he'd go about his way and never hurt anybody and think, well, nothing bad happened that time, so nothing bad's gonna happen again. That was like playing Russian roulette. And in this case, the chamber was filled on this one day. This time, when you thought nothing was going to happen to anybody else or didn't care about whether anything was going to happen to anybody else, something did happen to someone else. In any event, this case has tragic proportions beyond all measure. I can say in reviewing it in preparing for today that I read every letter, every email that was sent. There were some that I think probably were done after seeing someone else's email and then kind of signed their name to the same email, but I think they were probably they all came to me heartfelt, the people who felt an emotional tie to the victim.
Mr. Martin, I could never ever begin to understand the scars I've caused to you as a husband. To lose your best friend and your wife, Terry Martin. I couldn't imagine all the pain and suffering I've caused to your whole family. I can only hope for when you think of her, you think of how much of an amazing person she was and all the amazing, joyful experiences you shared with her. All the people she helped save out of her job at the hospital. She was truly a blessing to society. It's important that you think of those times with her, when her name is brought up, rather than how it was brought to an end. I do want you to know that I do take full responsibility for Terry Martin's life, physically and consciously. There isn't a night that passes that I don't pray for your whole family. Terry Martin's life was taken recklessly by me, and she will never be forgotten. I assure you that this tragedy will remain in me always and forever in every aspect. Thank you for letting me speak.
Terry Martin's husband, Olin Martin, a Lorain County narcotics detective, expressed profound disappointment with the 6-year sentence, considering it insufficient for the loss of his wife.
To make a quick phone call, to share a story, ask a question, or merely say that I love you. I've been robbed the holidays, robbed evenings together, days together on our boat, robbed of sharing that moment when our youngest daughter, Julia, graduates from college, gets married, and has a grandchild, or when Miranda has her first child. We've been robbed of that by you. I could go on and on about the changes in my life, physical, mental, and spiritual. Quite simply, the love of my life, best friend, was robbed from me by you, Royce Kowalczyk. And I'm now destined to holding on to emotions of days gone by, and sounds, tastes, and days that remind me of all that's been ripped from my life. On March 2nd, I started my day like any other day. Waking to share morning coffee with my wife, Terry. Watch the news together for an hour before we prepared to leave for work. But March 2nd was significantly different for us that day in that we were enjoying our fifth morning in our new home together here. Since Terry had been able to move here from our home in Columbus and had started a new job at the Cleveland Clinic. It was our new adventure and an exciting time for us. Terry and I had been married nearly 10 years. I celebrated my 10th anniversary without my wife.
And my sentence must be proportional to not just the damage, because there are so many people that we see who are as a result of criminal activity. This is as tragic as any. In some ways more tragic because the victim was such a wonderful person. Under the law, the issues that I must deal with also include that the facts of this case, Mr. Kowalczyk was actually getting treatment before the second, after his first arrest and brought to this court. I have to rely on the facts and not hearsay as some of the information may have gotten out to the public. He wasn't out on probation in this case when he did what he did. He was a drug addict, and he was a selfish drug addict, as drug addicts are. And this is the kind of damage they do. But when I look at the Raylich case, not too long ago, I think the facts in that case were much worse. The result wasn't worse because it. I'm not trying to measure one life versus another. But I know that in the Raylich case, the defendant was nearly three times over the legal limit, driving at a high rate of speed, leading the police on a chase. That's terrible. You weren't far behind in what you were doing. You may not have been as conscious as the actions of Mr. Raylich, and that maybe goes more to the extent of criminal intent. This first case, Mr. Kowalczyk, 11 CR 084127. Had you not gotten in any further trouble, you would have probably qualified for intervention because you were not a repeater, you were not a violent offender, you were not a repeat felony, or you had not committed a felony in the past. You would have qualified for probation. It's not happening. Again, on consideration of all matters set forth by law that I am required to follow, it's the judgment of law and sentence of the court the defendant be sentenced as follows. On count 1, 5 years at the Lorraine Correctional Institution and a fine of $10,000. Count 2, merged, no sentence. Count 3, 1 year at the Lorraine Correctional Institution. Counts 4 through 8, no sentence. And count 9, there's no sentence on count 9 either. It's after been merged as well. All counts in this case are consecutive and concurrent to the sentences in the 2 previous cases. Upon your release from prison, there will be 3 years of mandatory post-release.
Prior to the sentencing, he initiated a letter-writing campaign, urging the judge to impose the maximum sentence of 13 years, reflecting the community's desire for a harsher penalty. In January 2025, during the sentencing of Angela and Jake Wagner for their roles in the 2016 Pike County Massacre, Andrea Shoemaker, the mother of victim Hannah Hazel Gilley, delivered a powerful victim impact statement. Addressing the court, Shoemaker referred to the Wagners as evil and the spawn of Satan, expressing her profound grief and anger over the loss of her daughter. She emphasized the devastating impact of the murders on her family, particularly highlighting the trauma experienced by her grandchildren who continue to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy.
You 3 helped plan, carry out, and my grandson, Ruger, who was 6 months old, laying in the bed between his mom and dad, Frankie, Roden, and Hazel Gilley, let alone your granddaughter's mother. How greedy of a grandmother are you? How greedy. You your granddaughter's mother. You're evil. You're evil. You are the spawn of Satan. And the Satan is Billy Wagner. You are the evilest mother to help plan, carry out, take the lives of 3 other mothers. My daughter was only 20, and you want 30 years of your life behind bars. 30? She was 20! 20! She never knew how to buy alcohol. She got 6 months of her life with her kid. 6 months. And Hannah Mae Roden, the love of your life, Jake Wagner. The love of your life. Your daughter's mother. She She got 4 days. Kylie Rogan got 4 days. Do you know what kind of questions I have to answer? First, it was bad people came in. Next, they see your faces on the news. So guess what? I had to explain more. Because they're not little kids no more. They're not 6 months old. They're not 4 days old. Ruger's soon to be 10. 10 years he's been without a daddy to teach him how to fish, to teach him how to do all the man things. He has to depend on uncles, cousins. Because of you, Jake. Greedy Jake Wagner. You. I want you to suffer. This is what I want. And I told all BCI. I want your mother to live. And you boys as well as your dad. I want you to know your mom feels a heartache of what it's like to bury a child. It's a heartache that never goes away. I hate you. You ruined my life. You ruined innocent children's lives. I hope you. I pray every day. I pray your grandchildren and your children never want anything to do with you. And I hope they never do. I hope your daughter hates you with a passion and as much heart as I hate you, Jake Wagner. You shook my hand and acted as if you was my friend. After you shot my daughter 5 times in the head. 5 times, man, while her son lay between them. And Hannah Mae, she's holding her little girl. And you shot her. How cold and evil you are, spawns of Satan. I'll say it again. Spawns of Satan, you and your brother. And you, evilness, created them. And Miss Rita, I feel so sorry for you because I know you're ashamed to have such a daughter and grandsons that evil. Because you was the first to feel the guilt and say you were sorry, and it was your Christian duty to tell the truth. So I have not very many words for you. My heart breaks for you to have.
Mr. Wagner, anything you want to say?
Actually, Your Honor, I have a lot I want to say. But it's all right.
Just pull the mic closer if you would. Try to keep your voice projected.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No, I have a lot I want to say. But if it's okay with you, instead of looking at you, I would like to look at the victim's family because they are who I really want to speak to.
You're entitled to do that.
You don't do that?
You can.
Well, I can't.
You're entitled to do that.
Oh, I can. Okay.
Yeah. So whatever's comfortable. You can stand if you want. You can face them. You can face me. Just make sure no disrespect happens.
No disrespect, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So, each and every one of you, well, not all of you, obviously, but I've had friendship or relationships with a lot of you. I know many of you. And I know full well that the weight of my crimes, what I've done to you and your family, there's no amount of apology I can give today, no amount of explanation, no thing I can do to help you ease the pain you have, loss, anger, hate. Nothing can save that. But I'm not going to tell you, oh, this, and that. I'm going to tell you about me. Because, yeah, I used to be a manipulator. Miss Gilly affirmed that, and I truly was. But after I committed this crime, I was filled with guilt. Miss Gilly, I'm going to look at you because I feel you have the most hate. And this is for you. So whenever I committed those crimes, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks later, I was weighted down with the guilt I did. And I said the most sincere prayer to that day I ever said, to that date. And I asked God. I didn't like what I did. Didn't like how I was living. Didn't like how the possibility of my daughter or even my nephew would grow up to be. And I asked God, I said, put me and my family back on the straight and narrow path by any means necessary. Any. And I can tell you today, I am not sorry I got caught. I'm sorry for what I've done. But I am glad I got caught. I 100% believe that it was Jesus who made me get caught, to answer my prayer, so he could become exactly who he's supposed to be to each of us, Lord, Savior. Because, silly, now I don't show much emotion. It's not in me. A quiet hour tonight, just me and God, I do. I won't show much here. I'm kind of breaking up a little bit, but that's just me. And I can tell you from my own experience, hate will not heal your heart. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't. But I ask you, if you are a woman of at least some kind of faith, you should really read the Bible, because hate won't do it. Hate will only condemn yourself. But I want you to know, what I want to tell all of you, is how I was, and how I believed, and how I truly thought I was going to heaven prior to being arrested. And how I learned in my own time, alone with Jesus, just him and his word. I set aside every human teaching I was ever taught, even John 3:16. I read the word for myself. John 3:16 don't save you. The Bible don't save you. Only a relationship with Jesus Christ will save you. And he did not promise one place in his word. I don't know how many of you have ever read the Bible. He's never promised he will save you from hell. He promised that he came here to save you from sin, to unleash you from the captivity of sin. We're all weak. We all fall short of the glory of God. I knew that, and I was one of those people who believed, okay, sure, I'm a sinner, I'll sin every day. It's not like, why should I try? Ask for forgiveness while I eat, go to sleep, and I'll be good. I wasn't good. That's not what Jesus preaches. Jesus says specifically, you come to me with all your burdens, all of your sorrows, all of your pain, and you surrender, and he will heal you. You know, some of you might know the verse which says you must become like a little child when you by no means enter the kingdom of God. You must repent when you by no means enter the kingdom of God. Repentance is what I thought prior to actually sitting down and reading the Bible myself. It's not asking for forgiveness. That comes from repentance. Repentance is to choose to look at what you've done, hate it, and forsake it. To forsake sin. Nobody can say that they are a God-fearing Christian, born again, and think sin is nothing. The least little sins, lying. Lying is just as much an abomination as any other thing. I've committed every single sin that the Bible lists. Blasphemy, denying Christ, like Peter did. No, never actually said it. But I've been in silence, and I heard someone else say it. And it's just as much sin. Me? I'm going to tell you exactly how God changed me. And I know it's taking a little bit extra time, but I feel the judge will allow this. It took me about 2 months after I was arrested. And I read that Bible twice, cover to cover. And I did not like what I found. Not the fact that it doesn't give salvation, but the fact that I realized I did not have it. I realized I did not have repentance and never did. Yeah, I believe it was superficial. My superficial faith had no power to change, no power to save, no power to have godly works in my life. Not one bit. But I was deceived. And every time I read it prior to that, I kept deceiving myself. Well, John 3:16, I'm good. No. You gotta read John through 14, 13, all the way to 21. He tells Nicodemus about repentance. He doesn't say the word, but he tells him. Men don't want to repent because they don't want to come out of darkness. Because their deeds will be brought into the light and be reproved. That's repentance. You know what we ask Jesus to do? Save us. Change us. Because we're sinners. He does not call us into a life of sin and just save us from hell. No, he calls us into a relationship so that he can transform our life. So we will be adequate ambassadors of Christ on earth in his love and his forgiveness. Whenever, it seems Miss Gillies left, but when all of you guys can probably have the same feeling that she does. When she said that, No, I wasn't crying on my eyes. My heart was breaking for her, just as it breaks for all of you. Because you made me in the darkness that I was in. The hate is the darkness. And I can tell you, not in spite, but I'm not miserable. I don't live in misery. I've experienced your loss, I've experienced your pain. This is my mom mentioned, because I believe that God done this to me, so he could help me have the compassion and empathy to feel what you guys have felt. Shoot, he's taken my daughter from me, my nephew, those two important precious people in my life. And he's done that, I believe, so that I would know how he feels about all his lost children. And that's what I do. I don't need to tell you about how good I am or this and that or what the things I do, because it's not important. I tell you this only because I care for each of you, each of your pain, each of your loss and your sorrow, but I trust in God, because he gives me comfort every time it does. And what he does for me, he can do for you. And I'm not trying to make myself look big and think big shot on the news and all that stuff, because I know everybody, not everybody, but many people are going to criticize what I say today. And don't get me wrong. Now you can see I did not write this down, because for the past 3.5 years I have been thinking about what to say, how I can help you, not justify myself, or fix it, or anything for myself, whatever the right word is, but how I can help you, each and every one of you, even my daughter, wherever she may be, everyone else who I've hurt. I want you to know the love and forgiveness that Christ has for you, so that he can bring good, as he promises, out of this terrible situation to help those who still have the opportunity to help. And I'm going to tell you one example of that.
Mr. Wagner, start wrapping it up, will you?
Less than 3 minutes.
All right.
One thing, and I want to tell you, Sheriff, not all the details. When I came in contact with another inmate, this is after my plea. And he told me, because I told him, I'm confidential, not necessarily how a Catholic priest does it, but what you confess to me, I'm not going to tell no one else. And he told me about he was going through a similar situation I was. How he was planning as soon as he got out, he was going to go kill his baby.
Stop.
Shoemaker's emotional address underscored the deep pain and lasting consequences inflicted upon the victims' families by the Wagners' actions. In March 2010, 21-year-old Julianne Gonzalez disappeared in Austin, Texas. She was last seen on March 26, 2010, when she went to pick up her 2-year-old daughter, Layla, from her estranged husband, George de la Cruz. Gonzalez's car was later found abandoned at a Walgreens parking lot with her personal belongings inside. Despite extensive searches, her body has never been found. In September 2016, after a trial that lasted nearly 2 weeks, a jury found de la Cruz guilty of murder in Gonzalez's disappearance.
Just looked very out of place. I couldn't come up with a logical reason why that would be there. And I was told by George that someone else dug it for plumbing when they were going to turn it into an apartment.
Prosecutors argued that de la Cruz took the life of Gonzalez and staged her disappearance, using her phone and social media accounts to make it appear as though she had left voluntarily.
My sister came out and she said to me to stay close with her and that he slapped her. And her face was really, really red from it. He was telling me that she had a bad feeling, and she kept on saying that over and over.
Evidence presented included cell phone records showing Gonzalez's phone remained near de la Cruz's home after her disappearance, and surveillance footage capturing him using her credit cards. De la Cruz did not testify during the trial. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Gonzalez's body has never been found, and her family continues to seek closure. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can stay updated with our latest videos.